Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier, as always. Thank you. Let me start with some home thoughts. I followed David Yarrow, who is a photographer, extremely accomplished, and he's been visiting the Tsavo not too long ago. And in this photograph, it says, "The majestic elephants of Tsavo, Kenya, we look forward to showing many new images at the Art Miami Fair." It's a wonderful photograph. We were in the Tsavo, but on the western side, Tsavo West at Finch-Hattons, and we went on a late evening trip around Zima Springs and took this film. Do take a look, because as we were strolling round the springs, suddenly we saw all these elephants emerge in the shadows, and it was a pretty extraordinary close-up experience. Another photograph from Tsavo East, where David took his photograph at Lugard Falls, sunset, Christmas Day, 4 or 5 years ago. And then quite recently we're in Finch-Hattons, and they got this wonderful swimming pool. And it's right there on the edge of the park, and it gives you an added frisson of danger. There's no fence at the edge at all. And in this photograph, this is the old Lunatic Express railway line, Mombasa to Nairobi, just outside the entrance to Tsavo East. Vala Afshar, who I follow on Twitter, got my attention with a Steve Jobs quotation. "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become." Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip celebrated 70 years of marriage, becoming Britain's first reigning couple to mark a platinum wedding anniversary. I came across an old song which I remembered from my youth, the Style Council, "Shout to the Top." Political reflections: Angela Merkel is not going to resign as the Chancellor of Germany. No, that's not on the table, she said, with a small suppressed smile when asked by one of two interviewers for the German television broadcaster ZDF if that prospect had, in quiet moments, occurred to her. On Sunday night came the fall of Jamaica, or as the German press headlines put it, "Jamaica is over and Jamaica done," after weeks of talks and what Merkel in interviews on Monday said were dozens of pages of carefully worked out agreements on everything from energy policy to kindergarten funding. The Free Democrats walked away from the negotiations. This means that Germany technically has only a caretaker government at the moment, and Merkel has only some narrow options. She could try to govern with a minority, cobbling together the votes she needs each time a bill comes up. Under Germany's rules, this is possible, though it has not been attempted in the post-war era. She could call new elections, which wouldn't happen until perhaps March. I wouldn't rule it out, Merkel said, indicating that new elections might be preferable to the first option. She could try to keep negotiating, perhaps with the SPD, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Germany's president, whose role is usually only a symbolic ratification of what the election winners work out, said on Monday he would encourage this approach. He belongs to the SPD, and so he might have some influence there. Or Merkel could, in fact, resign and make it all someone else's problem. But whose? One reason that Germany is in this fix is that after 12 years with Merkel in charge, there is no obvious other leader with her national, let alone international standing. It is telling that one of the European concerns about the end of Jamaica is that no one but Merkel has the authority to get the Brexit talks done. Until there is a settlement in Germany, those may be paralyzed too. I cannot see Angela Merkel exiting stage left at this point, and in part I agree with the article that there is no clear person who can take up the baton. Has Kushner given Riyadh carte blanche? Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have found themselves at odds of late with the US State Department diplomats and Defense Department leadership taking provocative actions by blockading Qatar, summoning Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri earlier this month to Saudi Arabia, where he abruptly resigned, and blockading since November the 6th major Yemeni ports from desperately needed humanitarian aid shipments in retaliation for a November the 4th Houthi missile strike targeting Riyadh's international airport. State and defense have urged Riyadh and Abu Dhabi to ease their pressure campaigns on Qatar and Lebanon and improve aid access in Yemen to avert catastrophic famine. But Saudi and Emirati officials have suggested to US diplomatic interlocutors that they feel they have at least tacit approval from the White House for their hardline actions. In particular from President Donald Trump and his son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, who Trump has tasked with leading the Middle East peace efforts. Kushner reportedly established a close rapport with UAE Ambassador to the United States Yusuf al-Ottayba, as well as good relations with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, with whom Kushner met in Riyadh in late October. When the Saudis and Emiratis were about to launch the blockade of Qatar in June, the then US Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, Stuart Jones, got a call in the middle of the night from Ottayba to inform him of the impending action. Jones's reaction was extremely harsh. "What are you guys doing? This is crazy." Yusuf Ottayba's response was, "Have you spoken to the White House?" The problem is that the Saudis think Trump and Kushner are the only ones whose views matter, and they're probably right. And this goes back to what I was writing on the 13th of November about the capture of a 32-year-old wannabe king and the future price of crude oil. And I said Saudi and its allies, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, are caught in an ever-tightening sheer pincer. The paranoia in the palaces in Saudi Arabia is real and existential. And what is also clear, I wrote, Netanyahu, MBZ, Jared Kushner, and a Trump carte blanche have all leveraged this existential paranoia to effect not a state capture, but a kingdom capture. I said the Guptas were a precursor for this particular capture. And then I was talking about, this famous quote, "How can I communicate with them while they prepare for the arrival of Al-Mahdi al-Montazar?" I was using that as an example of the paranoia. Google's plan to isolate Russian media is an act of information warfare. This is an interesting point that's being made on RT. And I take you back to September 2012 when I was quoting an article written in 1997 which said one of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. The information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics, the author suggests. It will be spawned, like any Hollywood drama, out of raw emotions, hatred, jealousy, and greed, emotions rather than strategy, will set the terms of information warfare struggles. And then in December, I was writing about the Russian intervention in the US election, and I was quoting Don DeLillo, "We have a deviate tomahawk." The specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in, a voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers at Colorado Command. "We have a deviate tomahawk. We copy, there's a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We are clearing an outframe to locate source. Thank you, Colorado." It is probably just selective noise. You are negative red on the step function quad. was a voice, I told them. We have just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pidgin, is a melange of repartee, laughter, and song, with a quality of purest, sweetest sadness. Somehow we were picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. I have no doubt that Putin ran a seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference which amplified the Trump candidacy. Interesting article in The Economist, a Peronist on the Potomac, saying a president is swept into office after whipping up a wave of grievance and resentment. He claims to represent the people against internal exploiters and external threats. He purports to refound the nation and damns those who preceded him. He governs through confrontation and polarization. His language is aggressive. Opponents are branded as enemies or traitors. He uses the media to cement his connection with the masses while bridling critical journalism and at rebuffs to executive power. His policies focus on bringing short-term benefits to his political base, hang the long-term cost to the country's economic stability. Latin American experience teaches that populists are easily underestimated and can stay in power for a long time, but not forever. Populist regimes are often corrupt and spendthrift and usually fail to make people better off. Whatever the example from the White House, Latin American history shows that populist nationalism is a recipe for national decline. International markets, Bitcoin's white-knuckle ride continues as it hurtled past $8,000 yesterday. It's correcting a little bit, but it went briefly below 8,000, but we're back at 8,058. The inflation in this thing is massive, said Luke Hickmore. When will it collapse? Who knows? It will cause a lot of pain. Beginning of December, end of December last year, I said the optimal portfolio looks like this: one long Bitcoin, two long Bitcoin, short gold. Deutsche Bank Bitcoin is up 23% over the last week, up 136% since its recent lows back in mid-September, and up 8.4 times year to date, which was what my trade was suggesting. Interestingly, weekly Bitcoin volumes in Kenya peak at 50 million shillings per week on local Bitcoin's P2P marketplace. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 117.42, dollar index 94.03. Euro dollar's come off to 117.38, primarily a euro weakness story based on the failure to form a coalition government in Germany. Dollar index around the 94.03 level. Japanese yen 112.48, having the dollar yen having got to 111.89, which was the lowest since mid-October. Swiss franc 0.9930. The pound 132.46, the Australian dollar 0.7544, and that's down. Fella's low is 0.7529, its deepest nadir since mid-June. India rupee 65.035, South Korean won 1096.75, the Riyadh 325.74, Egyptian pound 17.6505, and the rand hovering around 14 at 14.0473, but they got the ratings agencies on Friday. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 3-month chart. We've come off with this uncertainty at the beating heart of the European Union project. Will Merkel be able to cobble something together, or will she not? Tencent is now worth over $500 billion, becoming the 6th largest company in the world. The thing to note about Tencent is the stake that Naspers bought in Tencent at a very cheap price a long time ago, which has lifted Naspers to a record, and with it, the South African All-Share Index. Starbucks issued some bonds, the longest portion of the offering, a 30-year security, yields 97 basis points more than US Treasuries. The world's worst economies next year. That's from The Economist. Do take a look. Commodity markets, as I said on the 13th of November, geopolitical risk is biting back, and I predicted the spot crude oil market reprices further to run and will lift Brent crude above $70 a barrel. Brent crude, when I looked last, was at $62.17. This chart is from T Commodity. And I was saying, that there's been a repricing, geopolitical risk in particular, and events in Saudi Arabia are the main factor. WTI crude oil is at $56.49. Gold, $12.80 trading. Really not going one way or the other. Emerging markets, Turkish 10-year yields jumped to an all-time high as President Erdogan triggered a fresh lira crisis with a verbal intervention. Dollar lira seen inverted here. Currencies weakened to a record low against the dollar. That's from David Inglis. Sub-Saharan Africa, I couldn't resist this from Zapiro Mugabe. Take a look. Ex-Zambian leader Kenneth Kaunda has been sent to convince Mugabe to go. This is from Reuters. My piece over the weekend was about Zimbabwe, and I said the genie's out of the bottle. I quoted one of my favorite writers, Riyadh Kapuscinski. It is authority that provokes revolution. This occurs when a feeling of impunity takes root among the elite. We are allowed anything. We can do anything. This is a delusion, but it rests on a certain rational foundation. For a while, it does indeed look as if they can do whatever they want. Scandal after scandal and illegality after illegality go unpunished. The people remain silent. They are afraid and do not yet feel their own strength. At the same time, they keep a detailed account of the wrongs, which at one particular moment are to be added up. The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. And I was saying the pictures from Harare on Saturday spoke to a people power, which is a genie which would be difficult, if not impossible, to put back in its bottle. It's like Christmas, said one marcher, Fred Nube, to Reuters. Now, on that point about people power, Zimbabwe war vets threaten to unleash crowds on Mugabe. Chris Mutsavangwa told reporters, we will bring back the crowds and they will do their business. Take a look at this photograph of people cheering a passing Zimbabwean Defense Force military vehicle. Again, Mutsavanga. We want to make Zimbabwe into a modern country. If it can sustain itself on autopilot with a rudderless administration, imagine if it's properly led, it will confound the world. I was saying Zimbabwe is entering a new normal, and that in the medium term, Zimbabwe has the potential to be one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. The people want to grab that opportunity with both hands. If ZANU-PF want to be part of that new, more optimistic future, they need to invite the opposition into government, look for a big cash boost from the international community in order to stabilize them now. Zimbabweans have only known one leader. That leader is now gone. I was a bit early in that prediction, but he's going. The economy is a shadow of its former self. GDP per capita was much higher than the regional average until the 1990s. Now it is about 30% lower. Emerson Mnangagwa is a very interesting Radio 4 13-minute clip about him. Zimbabwe's stocks fell another 10% yesterday. They plunged almost 30% since the military seized power from Mugabe on Wednesday morning. But this was expected, right? We had a massive inflation in the stock market as people rushed for quality, something that would retain its value in a hyperinflationary environment. I like this. Key images from Robert Mugabe's 37 years ruling Zimbabwe. This photograph is when he was first appointed Prime Minister in 1980, holding a press conference in his garden in Mount Pleasant, Salisbury, March 6, 1980. Interesting article in Asia Times talking about China, its influence in Zimbabwe, and calling it a win-win for China for now. Angolan president has sacked the heads of his intelligence service, C. Maria, and police, Ambrosio Limos. The two men had been reassigned for another 5-year mandate by former President Dos Santos just before he left office. It seems the Dos Santos empire is falling apart. And this has been pretty precipitate and quick on the part of Lorenzo. Ratings agencies Moody's and S&P decide whether to downgrade South Africa or not on Friday. Keep a lookout for that. HSBC, any exposure that we had to the Gupta's companies was inadvertent, they're saying. 25th of September, I wrote a piece, Reputational Risk and a Cautionary Tale from South Africa. South African all shares up 19.44% year to date at a fresh record. That's all about 10 cents in Naspers. Dollar versus rand 14.04. We hit 14.40, which was my target. We rebounded. Let's see what happens next. Nigeria's Eurobond is said to be $3 billion, its biggest yet, equally split between 10 and 30 tranches, yielding 6.5% and 7.625% respectively. Paul Wallace. S&P says Federal Republic of Nigeria's proposed Eurobonds assigned a B issue rating. Nigeria's economy grew 1.4% in quarter 3. Nigerian all shares up 36.9% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index up 50.8% year to date. Africans are getting healthier and wealthier, according to The Economist. In many ways, the story of Africa in the 21st century is one of success. Great strides have been made tackling diseases such as HIV, AIDS, and malaria. A baby born in Africa today is less likely to die young, more likely to go to school than one born in 2000. Life expectancy at birth increased by nearly 10 years to 60 between 2000 and 2015. But many Africans also feel less secure than they did a decade ago. Civil wars and social unrest have proliferated, according to an index of how Africa's leaders are performing. The country was a blank slate. You felt like whatever you did, as long as you did it well, the returns would be good. This is a Chinese investor in South Sudan. President Kenyatta will be sworn in as president on Tuesday, November the 28th. The opposition leader Raila Odinga left Kenya on the eve of the Supreme Court ruling. He apparently is in Zanzibar. I had a little Twitter debate with Mir Thakkar, and we were talking about why the opposition didn't participate in the second version of the election, and I said the failure to participate in version 2 was in part, I'm sure, a financial decision, but I'm saying it was a poor decision. And I was also saying, to be frank, it is very difficult for an opposition to run 2 campaigns in 1 year. It's expensive. And I said the opposition would have won if they had chosen a leader like Barack Obama in 2008, when he said, I serve as a blank screen on which people of vastly different political stripes project their own views. Nairobi all share bounced 1.04% higher yesterday. It's up 23.61% year to date. Safaricom firmed 0.98% and is within 3.73% of an all-time high. The NSE 20 rallied 1.31% yesterday, and that's up 18.61% year to date. Once again, I'm grateful that you stopped by, and if you've listened to all of this, I'm even more grateful